Stop her. The voice echoed across the mansion. Every head turned. Sophia Sterling froze halfway up the staircase as her father's personal assistant rushed toward her. The grand hall below was packed with powerful executives, politicians, and wealthy investors. At the center of it all sat a polished wooden casket. Inside was Richard Sterling, the billionaire founder of Sterling Global. The man who had spent his entire life treating Sophia like she didn't matter. The man everyone was mourning. And the man who had left behind a secret that was about to destroy everything his family thought they knew. Sophia looked down at the assistant. What is it? The woman held out a sealed envelope. Her hands were shaking. He wanted you to have this. Sophia frowned. What? He said it could only be opened after his funeral. The room suddenly grew silent. Because everyone knew one thing. Richard Sterling had never chosen Sophia. Not once. Not over his company. Not over his reputation. And certainly not over his son. Yet somehow, the envelope had her name on it. And before this day was over, an entire billion-dollar empire would change hands. But before we reveal what was inside that letter, tell us in the comments. Do you think parents should treat all their children equally? And if you're new here, don't forget to like this video and subscribe because stories like this prove that appearances can hide shocking truths. Now let's begin. Sophia had spent her entire life being invisible. Growing up in the Sterling mansion should have felt like a dream. Instead, it felt like living in someone else's shadow. That shadow had a name. Ethan Sterling, her older brother, the golden child, the future heir, the son their father adored. When Ethan turned 16, Richard bought him a luxury sports car. When Sophia turned 16, her father forgot her birthday. When Ethan graduated, Richard rented an entire ballroom. When Sophia graduated at the top of her class, she received a short text message. Congratulations. Nothing more. No celebration. No dinner. No hug. Just one word. Sophia kept telling herself it didn't hurt. But it did. Every single time. Children never stop wanting their parents' approval, even when they know they'll never get it. As the years passed, Ethan learned something dangerous. He learned that no matter what he did, his father would always choose him. He crashed expensive cars. Richard replaced them. He failed university classes. Richard made donations. He embarrassed the family. Richard defended him. Meanwhile, Sophia learned another lesson. Nobody was coming to save her. So she worked harder. While Ethan spent weekends partying on yachts, Sophia spent hers studying. While Ethan made connections through privilege, Sophia earned respect through results. By 25, she had completed degrees in finance and business management. She spoke 3 languages. She had worked in multiple industries, and she knew the company better than most executives. Yet whenever anyone praised her, Richard would smile and say, "That's nice." Then he'd turn back to Ethan. One evening, everything became painfully clear. The company was hosting its annual shareholder gala. Hundreds of influential guests filled the ballroom. Sophia had spent 6 months developing a strategy that would save one of the company's struggling divisions. The presentation was a success. Investors loved it. Executives praised it. The future looked bright. Then Ethan stepped onto the stage. He smiled, accepted the applause, and took credit for everything. Sophia stared in disbelief. Surely her father would correct him. Surely he would tell the truth. Instead, Richard stood up, proudly, clapping louder than anyone else. "That's my son." The audience erupted. Sophia felt something inside her break. Not because Ethan lied, but because her father let him. That night, she cried alone in her apartment. Not because she wanted recognition, but because she realized she would never receive it. No matter what she accomplished, no matter how hard she worked, no matter how much she sacrificed, she would never be enough. Months later, Richard made an announcement that shocked nobody. At a major company event attended by media from around the world, he introduced Ethan as his successor, the future CEO of Sterling Global. Cameras flashed. Applause thundered. Investors smiled. Ethan looked thrilled. Sophia wasn't even invited on stage. She sat quietly among the audience, watching her future disappear. Yet something unexpected happened. Not everyone was celebrating. Several senior executives exchanged nervous glances. Because unlike Richard, they knew the truth. Ethan wasn't ready. Not even close. Behind the scenes, he made reckless decisions, ignored expert advice, approved risky investments, and spent more time chasing attention than learning leadership. Meanwhile, Sophia continued solving problems nobody else could fix. Quietly, without recognition, without praise. Without reward, one executive finally approached Richard. Privately, respectfully. "Sir, are you certain Ethan is the right choice?" Richard's expression darkened instantly. The conversation ended. Just like that. Nobody questioned him again. Years passed. The gap between Ethan and Sophia only grew wider. One became increasingly entitled, the other increasingly capable. Then something strange began happening. Whenever major problems threatened the company, they somehow got solved. Deals were rescued. Losses were reduced. Crises disappeared. Richard knew exactly who was responsible. Sophia. He saw the reports, read the recommendations, reviewed the strategies. Again and again, his daughter saved the company. His daughter protected the empire. His daughter quietly fixed mistakes created by his son. And every time he discovered the truth, the guilt grew heavier. Because deep down he knew something he could never admit. Sophia wasn't merely competent. She was extraordinary. Far better than Ethan. Far better than anyone. But admitting that would mean admitting he had been wrong for decades. And Richard Sterling hated being wrong. Then came the phone call that changed everything. The doctor didn't waste time. The diagnosis was severe, aggressive, terminal. Richard listened in silence. For the first time in his life, money couldn't solve the problem. Power couldn't solve the problem. Influence couldn't solve the problem. His time was running out. As he sat alone in his office that evening, something unusual happened. He opened old files, old photographs, old company records, old memories. And for the first time in years, he stopped looking at profits. He started looking at regrets. There were more than he expected. Every page seemed to remind him of Sophia. There she was as a little girl holding a science award. There she was presenting innovative ideas. There she was helping him solve business challenges. Always present, always loyal, always overlooked. Richard stared at one photograph longer than the others. Sophia couldn't have been older than 10. She was smiling, looking up at him, still believing he loved her. The image shattered him, because he remembered what happened after that photo was taken. She had excitedly shown him a school project, and he had ignored her to answer a phone call he couldn't even remember anymore. But he remembered the disappointment in her eyes, the pain, the silence. The moment hope started dying, Richard lowered his head. For the first time in decades, the billionaire cried, not for himself, not for his illness, but for the daughter he had failed, the daughter who deserved so much more. And that's when he made a decision so shocking. It would leave his entire family speechless. A decision that would ignite a war after his death. A decision hidden inside the letter waiting for Sophia. But before we reveal what Richard decided, take a moment to like this video if you're still watching. And tell us below, do you think Sophia should forgive her father after everything he put her through? Because what happens next will leave everyone stunned. The moment Richard Sterling made that decision, he knew there was no going back. For years he had convinced himself that there would always be more time. More time to apologize. More time to fix things. More time to become the father Sophia deserved. But now the clock was running out. And for the first time in his life, Richard Sterling was terrified. Not of death, but of leaving this world without making things right. The following morning, he called his attorneys. 3 of the most respected legal minds in the country arrived at his office. They expected discussions about succession planning, tax structures, corporate transitions. Instead, Richard slid a folder across the table. "I want everything changed." The attorneys exchanged confused looks. "Everything, sir?" "Everything." One lawyer cleared his throat. "Are you certain?" Richard nodded. "More certain than I've ever been." Hours passed. Documents were reviewed. Assets were transferred. Trusts were modified. Ownership structures were rewritten. By sunset, the future of Sterling Global looked completely different. The billion-dollar empire everyone expected Ethan to inherit no longer belonged to him. But Richard wasn't finished. That night he began writing a letter. Not a business letter. Not a legal document. A father's confession. Perhaps the first honest thing he had written in years. Line after line filled the page. Mistakes. Regrets. Truths he had buried for decades. When he finally finished, tears stained the paper. He sealed it inside an envelope and wrote only 3 words on the front. For Sophia only. Months later, Richard Sterling died. The news dominated headlines. Tributes poured in from around the world. Business leaders praised his achievements. Politicians celebrated his legacy. Financial networks dedicated entire broadcasts to his life. But inside the Sterling family, a storm was already forming. Because Ethan had no doubt what came next. The company was his. The fortune was his. The empire was his. After all, his father had spent a lifetime preparing him for exactly that. Or so he believed. Back in the mansion, the funeral had ended. Guests filled the enormous hall. The atmosphere felt tense. Everyone was waiting for the reading of the will. Sophia sat quietly. As usual. Unnoticed. Ignored. Forgotten. Then the attorney stepped forward. Before the will is read, Mr. Sterling left specific instructions. Murmurs spread through the room. The attorney held up a sealed envelope. Every eye followed it. Sophia's heart began pounding. She recognized her name immediately. The attorney looked at her. He requested that you read this personally. Sophia slowly accepted the envelope. Her hands trembled. She wasn't sure why. Part of her wanted to leave. Another part desperately wanted answers. After a long silence, she opened it. The room became completely still. Then she began reading. To my daughter Sophia. Her voice nearly broke. The room listened. I spent my life making the biggest mistake a father can make. Confused looks appeared everywhere. Sophia continued. I convinced myself that strength meant preparing my son to lead. A pause. I was wrong. The room froze. Even Ethan stopped breathing. Sophia swallowed hard. I gave Ethan everything because I thought he needed confidence. Her eyes moved down the page. I gave you nothing because I believed you were already strong enough. A tear rolled down her cheek. The next line hit harder. That was never fairness. That was cowardice. Several guests exchanged stunned glances. Richard's words continued. I saw your talent. I saw your intelligence. I saw your sacrifices. And every time I chose silence. Sophia's voice cracked. Because for the first time in her entire life, her father was finally seeing her. Even if it came too late. She continued reading. You saved my company more times than anyone knows. You solved problems others couldn't solve. You earned every success through hard work. And yet I allowed others to take credit. The room was silent except for Sophia's voice. Many executives lowered their heads. Because they knew it was true. Then came the line that changed everything. If anyone deserves my legacy. Sophia paused. Her hands began shaking. The attorney watched carefully. Everyone leaned forward. Sophia took a breath. Then read the words aloud. It is you. Gasps filled the room. Sophia stared at the page. Certain she had misread it. But the words remained. It is you. Ethan jumped to his feet. This is ridiculous. The attorney raised a hand. Please sit down. No. Ethan's face had turned red. This doesn't change anything. The attorney looked at him calmly. Actually, it changes everything. The room fell silent again. The attorney opened a thick folder. Then he read the official will. Richard Sterling had transferred controlling ownership of Sterling Global to Sophia. The entire room exploded. People began talking all at once. Executives looked shocked. Investors looked stunned. Family members looked horrified. Ethan looked like the floor had disappeared beneath him. What? The word escaped his mouth in a whisper. Then louder. What? The attorney repeated himself. Sophia Sterling was now the majority owner. Sophia Sterling controlled the empire. Sophia Sterling had inherited everything. Ethan stared at his sister. Disbelief became anger. Anger became rage. This is a mistake. The attorney shook his head. It is not. My father promised me this company. No. The attorney replied quietly. He never did. For the first time in Ethan's life. Nobody protected him. Nobody defended him. Nobody gave him what he wanted. And he couldn't handle it. You manipulated him. He pointed at Sophia. You turned him against me. Sophia stared at him. Then something unexpected happened. She smiled sadly. Not because she had won, but because she finally understood. Ethan wasn't the villain. Not really. He had spent his entire life trapped inside the same broken system. Richard had damaged both of them, just in different ways. One child was ignored. The other was spoiled. Neither outcome was love. The realization hit Sophia harder than she expected. And suddenly she no longer felt angry. Just sad. Very sad. Days later, Sterling Global's board gathered. Many expected chaos. Instead, they witnessed something remarkable. Sophia entered the boardroom. Calm. Prepared. Confident. Within minutes it became obvious. She knew every department. Every challenge. Every weakness. Every opportunity. The executives looked at one another. They had known this all along. The wrong child had been chosen. For years. One director finally spoke. We've been waiting for this. Others nodded. Sophia almost laughed, because after spending her entire life feeling invisible, someone was finally acknowledging her worth, not because of her last name, but because of her ability. Over the following months, Sterling Global transformed. Profits improved. Employee satisfaction increased. Innovation returned. Investors regained confidence. The company flourished, not through luck, not through inheritance, but through leadership, real leadership. Meanwhile, Ethan struggled. Without constant protection, reality hit hard. For the first time, he had to stand on his own. And at first, he failed. Repeatedly. The experience humbled him. Slowly, painfully, but genuinely. Then one afternoon, something unexpected happened. Sophia received a visitor. Ethan. He looked different. Older somehow. Less arrogant. Less entitled. He sat across from her. Neither spoke for several moments. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. I hated you. Sophia looked at him. I know. I thought you stole everything. She remained quiet. Ethan stared at the floor. Then his voice cracked. But you didn't. For a moment, he couldn't continue. Years of resentment seemed to collapse all at once. He should have loved us both. Sophia felt tears filling her eyes. Because those words captured the tragedy perfectly. Not one child. Both children. Richard's choices had hurt everyone. Ethan wiped his eyes. I don't know how to fix any of this. Sophia reached across the table and took his hand. You start by telling the truth. The siblings sat there for a long time. Talking. Really talking. Perhaps for the first time ever. Not as rivals. Not as competitors. As family. Months later, Sophia visited her father's grave. The sun was beginning to set. The cemetery was quiet. She stood alone, holding the letter. The same letter that had changed everything. For several minutes, she said nothing. Then she spoke softly. You were wrong about a lot of things. A faint smile appeared. But at least you found the courage to admit it. Her eyes filled with tears. I wish you had done it sooner. The wind moved gently through the trees. Sophia looked down at the stone. For years, she had carried anger, pain, rejection, questions. Now something else filled that space. Peace. Not because the past had changed, but because she no longer needed it to. She folded the letter carefully, placed it against the headstone, and turned away. As she walked toward the exit, she didn't look back. Because her future was finally in front of her, not behind her. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't chasing anyone's approval. She didn't need it anymore. The forgotten daughter had become the leader. The overlooked child had become the legacy. And the billionaire father who chose his son over his daughter had spent his final days making sure the world knew the truth. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money. It's the courage to finally do what's right. If this story moved you, make sure you like this video and subscribe for more powerful stories. And tell us in the comments. If you were Sophia, would you have forgiven your father? We'll see you in the next story.